Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today, we have reached the end of 1 month, so rather than talking about a specific book, I want to do the usual wrap-up and TBR for October and November. So what did I read in October? There were plenty of good reads, good spooky reads particularly, and I think I read a pretty great horror book that was pretty sinister and existentially terrifying at times. So really enjoyed what I read in October, and I'm really looking forward to the books that I have planned for November. Hopefully I'll get to some, but I do have to go to Denver in the middle of the month, so I might not read as much as I want to, but I'll also be on a plane, so hopefully that provides me with some quality reading time. And then, of course, we are nearing the end of the year, so as per usual, I'm going to have to start thinking about the wrap-up, or not the wrap-up, but the sort of best of books, which there are probably a number of good contenders this year, as well as the TBR for next year, where I'm hoping to get some things that I haven't quite gotten to yet, haven't quite made time for. There's always more books, more areas that I could start reading. I'm hoping that 2025 is a good year for books, but we will get to that eventually. For now, let's talk about the wrap-up and TBR, and we'll move on from there. So for October, in terms of books, I read Berserk Volume 14, which I thought was mainly just okay. I think the problem is I followed the I was following Volume 13, which is possibly, again, one of the greatest sort of bits of literature out there, the story of Griffith's betrayal of Guts and the Band of the Hawk. And Volume 14, I was kind of expecting, something fiery, and I don't think I quite got that, but it was still fine. Any amount of Berserk is a good amount of Berserk, in my opinion. I also read Death Note Volume 1, which I thought was just mostly good. I'm looking forward to reading more in the future. And then Demon Slayer Volume 1, which was also fun. I hope to read more of that. The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which I thought was pretty amazing. Definitely an interesting study of humanity at the end of time, at the end of the world. Not looking so great, kind of bleak, but at least we have each other, sort of. A lot to still consider from that. I also read Carrier Wave by Robert Brockway, probably the best of the month. A really hard-hitting horror story that was sort of told in the form of a bunch of short stories underlying a central event. It was, as I mentioned, it was kind of like existentially terrifying in that there was a lot of questions of whether humanity was really top of the food chain, and can we survive? Like, are we prone to violence, or are we prone to doing better things? And I think the best type of horror is that gets you to consider, or it makes you fear for things more than just scary monsters. Scary monsters can be great, but maybe the truest scary monster is your fellow man, or something like that. But I really enjoyed Carrier Wave, and I definitely recommend that you seek it out. It's probably a great book to read outside of October as well. I also read The Auctioneer by Joan Sampson, which was largely boring. I had heard good things about it, but it didn't land, or it didn't sort of stand up to any of that. It was just kind of a boring story. And I can understand what the author was trying to say in the creeping rise of fascism and authoritarians in the world, but it was told in such a boring way that it didn't really strike me all that much, so that was unfortunate. And then I also read Bad Marie, which was pretty good, a very fun story, and definitely sort of exploring like the psychological underpinnings of someone who does the worst things possible, and why they might do those things. So that's something that I would also recommend to you out there. I also read a number of short stories, including Ligeia by Edgar Allan Poe, which was okay. Here There Be Tigers, again, Stephen King, also okay, not really a lot there. Midnight Meat Train by Clive Barker, which I thought was great, probably the best of the month for short stories. Just really unsettling and creepy and whatnot. Lovecraftian horror as well, or Clive Barker horror. Definitely something that's worth checking out. Silent Snow, Secret Snow by Conrad Aiken, which I thought was mostly bland and forgettable. And then The Bloody Chamber, which I thought was pretty good. Pretty good short story that kind of adapted the Bluebeard fairy tale, but also sort of added a sort of more overt feminist elements, which made it stand out. So I recommend that one too. I also read a number of poems for October. Spooktober, so go check out my Poetry Thursday playlist for some spooky selections. But what do I intend to read for November? In terms of books for the TBR, I have Jawbone, which I didn't get to in October, so I'll read that. It's horror, but sometimes we got to read horror outside of October and into November. The Bevan reads, which I still need to get to. Berserk, again, That Night in the Library, which I picked up in Toronto but still haven't gotten to after a couple months. The Ice Storm, which is a classic book, I think from the 90s, that I stumbled across a while back and I want to get to. And then any book that I pick up from the library, that's on my TBR as well. As for short stories, I want to read some short stories by Karen Russell and Edward Jones, as well as a few other short stories from my local library. And then I have a number of poems planned, including a few leftover spooky ones that I found in October. But I didn't have time for all of them in October, so I'm just continuing into November. So we're getting extra spooky, which is not really, you can't complain about those sort of things. You gotta enjoy the spooky where you can get it. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the wrap-up and TBR for November. If you have any recommendations, any books you think that might suit my fancy or something like that, make a recommendation in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, just simply tell me what you thought of some of the books that were in my wrap-up. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about some of these books or these authors as well. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and turkey-eating travels. Farewell.